And hello and welcome to another interview with me, Brandon Singh. And our interviewee is Dr. Phillipp Simon of the USDA, a carrot breeder of the USDA, specializing in flavor. Would you care to introduce yourself any further?
Yeah, maybe a little bit. I oversee the USDA carrot breeding program, focusing on carrots for fresh market use, so raw carrots or whole carrots or baby carrots. And we have a pretty big project looking at a wide range of things, and we learn a lot from the history of the crop. And I spend most of my time on carrots. I have spent a fair bit of time on garlic earlier in my career and a little bit yet. So glad to be talking to you about those two crops today.
Thank you. You'll start off with talking about this question right here, which is what land races are the yellow and red carrots derived from, and what breeding processes have been done to increase the flavonoids found within these accessions?
Sure, maybe I can share the screen, and you've got a later question coming up on flavonoids. We can maybe look at that one after this. Is that okay with you, Brandon?
That sounds good for me.
Okay, let me, if
you're now able to share your screen, so you should be good.
Right, so let's share, let's see, where are we? Here we are. Let's see, where's the carrot pictures on this? There's some carrots someplace. I've got to minimize some stuff so I can access the controls here. Let's see, sorry about this. I'm not sure. There we go. Why can't I? I'm not able to get to the, there we go. Okay, I got things going now. So where I wanted to start was right here. Can you see that?
I can see that.
Let me put it in presentation mode. So this talks about carrots a little more generally, and in terms of the development of different land races of different colors. And actually, your question was about land races that of red and yellow carrots. Yellow carrots are the oldest of carrots, along with purple. As a crop, the first certainty of carrots as a root crop was only 1,100 years ago, which as crops go is pretty young. Something like wheat and barley go back 15,000 years, and potatoes and rice about 5 to 10,000. So carrots haven't been around that long. And probably the crop was first domesticated in Central Asia, which means places like Afghanistan, Iran, Pakistan. And purple and yellow were the first two colors. Question you might ask is why purple and yellow? We do not know. There's very little written about the history of carrots of any type, but it was known that it has been written and it has been recorded in written history that yellow and purple carrots were around starting in that part of the world and spreading around the world after that. And throughout the early history, when purple and yellow were the colors, purple was viewed as better flavored than yellow, but the purple carrots probably had a yellow center to them. So the really important but very unknown question is why were these colors domesticated? Where did they exactly come from? They came from wild carrots. We don't know the processes at all. And like I said, compared to other crops, there's not a very good written history. We do know from written history that the crop spread to the west and to the east, primarily to the west, through the west, through the Middle East, through North Africa, and then finally into Europe only about 500 years ago. So started 1,100 years ago in Central Asia, then moved west and into Europe about 500 years ago. Moved east a little more slowly, and carrot didn't seem to be quite so popular, but these were still yellow and purple initially. And it wasn't until about it says here 1600s, probably 1500s, that orange types were selected in Europe or maybe Turkey. So that's more than you want to know about red than yellow or than yellow. But in terms of red carrots, maybe I can move to another slide. See if yeah. So this talks about the colors of carrots and where the written history indicates they were. And the top part of this diagram starts in the origin of Central Asia, where purple and yellow were the carrot colors, and like I said, orange didn't show up until about the 1500s, 1600s. I don't have red on this particular slide, but reds showed up at about the same time as oranges and yellows. And reds, unlike yellows, oranges, and purples and whites, reds first showed up in the East, primarily places like Pakistan, India, Korea, China, and Japan. So most of the red carrots we have today are from Asia originally, whereas the other colors primarily are from brought over, at least in the US, were carrots brought over with the European settlers that came to the country. So exactly what the breeding process was, it probably was breeding done by women because vegetable development historically in most places of the world has been done by women. It seems that men historically have spent more time in big fields raising animals, and women spend more time in gardens raising the food crops that the family eats. And so we don't know, again, we don't know the details of this, but we do know that carrots have been around for a long time. There's some evidence of carrots being used prehistorically too, but probably not as a root crop, because the family of plants that carrots in is very aromatic, including crops like fennel and cumin and coriander. And all of these are very flavorful seeds that we eat, and so are carrot seeds. So anyway, that's a little bit then of the breeding history, primarily on this slide, the colors other than red, but red started showing up in Asia about the same time as orange carrots started showing up in Europe.
Quick follow-up question.
Yes.
Could it be possible that the crossbreed of purple and yellow carrot varieties could have led to the appearance of orange and red ones?
Probably not. Let me see what my next slide is. So this just shows some of the colors. Probably not. Probably, in fact, quite certainly, based on what we've been able to figure out looking at some of the genetic fingerprints of carrots, it looks like like orange carrots were derived from yellow carrots. That yellow carrots were the first colors, like I said, yellow with purple. And then orange were quite certainly derived from orange. Whether they were derived in Europe isn't certain. The first definite history of orange carrots is in Europe, but some indication they may have actually been, or may have originated in Turkey. Turkey's a place where there's lots of carrots historically. It's kind of funny and no good explanation for it, but for whatever reason, when carrots got to Turkey, they became very much more popular than they have in other places. So we don't know whether orange carrots originally came from yellow carrots in Turkey or from yellow carrots in Europe, but that's where orange quite certainly came from.
Thank you.
Sure. Yeah, so there's really only a few genes that control the color. So on this slide, you see the colors aren't very clearly differentiated here, but that's upper right is in this photo of colored carrots is a yellow carrot and then some white carrots towards the bottom. That's a wild carrot, that skinny one with lateral roots coming out of it toward the bottom, and those are always white. So it's one gene difference going from white to yellow, another 2 genes going from yellow to orange, and then another 2 genes going from orange to red. So we know that from the genetics of how those colors are controlled from a genetic standpoint. So that's what makes me answer your question to say we know quite certainly that orange carrots were derived from yellow. We can cross, and we do cross the different colors, and it's always interesting thing to do, and you can get a whole Technicolor range that way.
Cool. So I know that you work with a lot of different cultivars of carrots. Have you noticed that there's some that stand out in terms of how well they pass on either a flavonoid trait or a color trait?
Yeah, I'm gonna see what my next slide here is. That's garlic, so we'll talk about that in a little bit. All of the colors, well, okay. The truest, so if you are growing carrots and producing seed and you have orange carrots, if you take those orange carrots and grow a seed crop from them, you quite certainly will get orange carrots and orange carrots only, not yellow carrots, and probably not red carrots. Something like purple carrots, when you produce a seed crop from a group of purple carrots, you may not get all purple carrots. There may be some that are not purple, and that's because of the different genetics of the colors. So the trueness of color in a breeding program is dictated by the genetics, the genes that control those colors, and purple is the dominant trait for those geneticists in the audience, and that's what makes it a little more unreliable, because even though it's dominant and shows up readily, it means that it's going to hide some of the non-purple recessive versions of it, whereas orange is recessive, and so orange carrots intercrossed always get you orange carrots.
I was wondering if you could actually breed even more orangey carrots or a more orangey flavored carrot, that typical flavor that you get with an orange carrot, if you can increase that.
Indeed, yes, and that's something that my project has done a lot of work on, is making an orange carrot more orange. And the reason for that is the orange carrot is, so all of these colors, I don't have it in this deck of slides I'm showing you, but each of these colors has some nutritional value that goes along with them. I know you're going to ask about flavonoids, and so the purple carrots are highest in flavonoids. And there's some carrots that are solid purple and dark purple. The darker the color, for all of the nutritional pigments, the darker the color, the more the nutrition. So carrots that's a solid dark purple is very high in flavonoids. Those purple anthocyanin pigments are in the flavonoid family, and very high in flavonoid content. A dark orange carrot has more of the carotenes. That's a different category of pigments. Has more of the carotene pigments than a light orange carrot has. And so that's what we've, in my breeding program, been doing over the years, is breeding orange carrots to be more orange. And in fact, it's been a successful project, because if you look at the average, I'll give you some numbers that don't mean much until I tell you more about it, but an average carrot of 1970 had about 90 parts per million orange carrots now had about 90 parts per million, 90 of carotenoids. Carrots today have about 140 parts per million carotenoids. So the orange carrots today that are just average carrots in the supermarket are about 50% more nutritious than they were in 1970. And that's because of the selective breeding we've done to breed. When we're looking at a collection of orange carrots, we interbreed the orangest ones, and then that gives us oranger carrots the next generation. And that's what the seed companies are doing. We develop carrots, but we provide that seed to seed companies, and they're the ones that commercialize it. So the seed that's a grower grows is coming from a seed company, but it's seed that ultimately started in many cases from my project. And again, the darker orange it is, the more of these carotene pigments. Carotene pigments are a category of colors that control the orange, red, and yellow colors. Those are all carotenoids. In terms of nutrition, the orange is most important because those orange pigments, when we eat them, are broken down into vitamin A, which is it's a mandatory vitamin. There's not a lot of vitamin A deficiency in the US. There's a little bit, but globally there continues to be a lot of vitamin A deficiency. It's a nasty nutritional disease. And so we are working internationally to get higher orange carrots out there for consumers. The yellow pigments are important for eye health in particular. The red pigments protect against some forms of cancer. Those red pigments in carrots are the same red pigments as in red tomatoes or in red watermelons. So that's one group of carrot pigments is the carotenoids, orange, yellow, and red. And then the other group of pigments is the anthocyanins, which is a flavonoid, and those are the purple pigments.
Have you noticed any cultivars in your breeding program or any accessions that have shown up in your breeding program that can pass on those traits, traits very well?
Yeah, they all do. They all do pretty well, and it's kind of interesting. Carrot is a crop that the carrots that we grow can be grown pretty much anywhere in the world. A lot of crops you can only grow in certain latitudes, but so we grow a winter crop of carrots in Southern California, where we plant in October and harvest in March, a few miles north of the Mexican border, in a University of California collaborator field. The pigments there are, in terms of the expression or the color that we get there, is pretty much the same as what we're seeing here in Wisconsin or in Washington or Michigan or Indiana or New York, or for that matter, North Carolina. And so these are passed on quite reliably. And so, yeah, it's kind of interesting that they are passed on as well as they are. Mm-hmm. In terms of what ones might be better than another, they're all about the same. Like I said, the genetics has some factor on it, but once you have a reliable purple carrot, it's going to be reliable purple unless you've got some mix up in your breeding program.
Thank you. Sure. One more quick question on carrots before we move on to garlic. Have you noticed any correspondence with disease resistance to different colors? Like are the purple varieties more resistant to certain diseases than, say, the orange ones?
Are they more what?
Resistant to certain diseases than orange ones?
Yes. That's a great question. And another sort of similar question is, do they taste different because of the color? And it turns out that the color and the flavor and the resistance to diseases are all controlled by different genes. And so we can mix and match all those combinations as we want to. Some combinations are a little tougher to put together, but that's an interesting question. We were wondering about that we continue to wonder about that as we move along, because it'd be a hard story if it turned out that the good flavored carrots all had poor nutritional value, for instance, or a lot of disease susceptibility. But luckily we can breed for those independently and put all the combinations, so good disease, good color, and good flavor together.
Thank you. I think now we can move on to garlic now.
Sure. Just put a picture up of garlic while you're asking your question.
Sounds good. So what do we have in terms of knowledge of the origins and domestication of garlic?
Yeah, that's garlic has been written about an awful lot more than carrots in terms of written history, and there's many more drawings of garlic historically than carrots. Having said that, the history is not overly clear, because it seems that when garlic gets someplace and is being grown, those places it gets to claim it as their own. And so it's been thought that garlic maybe originated in the Mediterranean or in Sicily or in Europe, but it turns out garlic quite certainly, like carrot, it turns out, which is just happenstance, originated in Central Asia. So this region of Afghanistan, Uzbekistan, Pakistan, stands, Kazakhstan. So that's where garlic first occurred as and was used as a crop, from what we can tell if we take a critical look at the history of the crop. And I think so we know, so when we talk about where a crop started, that's referred to as its center of origin or center of diversity. And it was, right now, garlic doesn't, you can find wild carrot all over the world. You can't find wild garlic nearly as widely as you can wild carrot. Right now, the primary wild garlic that's still out there goes from roughly Azerbaijan to Pakistan. There's not much wild garlic left outside of that. It was thought that wild garlic occurred all the way from China to across northern Africa, beyond Egypt, even to Morocco and into Europe. At one point, that region I just mentioned had more rainfall than it currently does, but as precipitation diminished over the years, we're talking about several thousand years ago, that's when wild garlic occurred that widely. Over the last couple thousand years, there's been less water, especially in places like North Africa and parts of Asia. And as that happened, wild garlic no longer occurs there.
Fascinating. So there's been many changes in garlic, I suppose. Unless the wild garlic also produces bulbules in massive quantities. So what genetic changes have happened to change it from a seed-producing plant to a bulbule-producing plant, I guess?
That's a great question, I'll tell you. That's what my focus on garlic has been, is looking at that question. So here's just a map showing some of the parts of the world I just talked about. So I don't know if you can see my cursor or not, but Central Asia is here west of India and east of the Saudi Arabia. That's the origins of both garlic and carrot. So we didn't know really anything about the origins of garlic when it wasn't really known about much about the diversity of the crop. Garlic has been grown for a lot longer period in lots of places, and there are many different cultivated types or cultivars of garlic that are out there. But since most of the garlic, in fact, almost all of the garlic in history that's recorded has been asexually propagated or grown from bulbs from cloves and not from seed, we didn't have any idea what kind of genetic diversity there was in garlic. And I'll get to your question of why we have garlic today without seed, but we do know that there's a large amount of garlic genetic diversity in the garlic that's out there. But having said that, yet today, almost all garlic that's grown is grown from cloves of the bulb rather than from seeds. And that's because seed production on garlic is not an easy thing to do. I think, so this is some wild garlic that I picked up in 1989, at the time it was Soviet Union, growing out of the rocks. Garlic likes rocky, kind of dry areas. And you see some on the top of the stalk. This is what growers out there of garlic would know as a hardneck garlic. You can see at the top of these stalks, you can see where the flowers had been. And there is some seed in these wild garlics, not a lot, but there is some. And it seems that wild garlic, in fact, we have evidence that wild garlics do reproduce from seeds sometimes. It's been tough, though, to get seed production on garlic. Even though this happens in the wild, it probably doesn't happen a lot. But we know that when we look at this wild garlic from, in this case, this is a part of the world that currently is Uzbekistan, this Uzbek garlic, when we look at it, it looks like there has been some garlic from seed rather than from the cloves of the bulb in this part of the world, in this wild garlic. I'm going to change slides here. So this is another wild garlic plant. You can't see the top of the plant with the seeds on it so much, but you can maybe in the center of the top see a collection of flowers, and there were some seeds in that collection of flowers. This is another part of the world. This is also Uzbekistan, where I'm collecting some garlic with a couple of collaborators here. This field happened to have both wild garlic and wild carrot in it, but this is the kind of terrain that garlic comes from, fairly dry, and probably that dry land stimulates some of the seed production. But it's a great question. This is some commercial garlic, and this was actually in Syria. It's a good question of, we've got a crop today that doesn't produce seed. We have to assume it came from seed at some point. What happened in the meantime? What happened in the meantime is that we think that almost all the garlic, if not all the garlic that's grown around the world, came from wild garlic collected in Central Asia, in Uzbekistan, in Afghanistan, in Pakistan, somewhere in there. In fact, when we were collecting this, and I've been there a couple of times, you'll find nomadic people going through that area yet today, picking up wild garlic in the wild. And they're probably bringing it with them, and they're nomadic and they're bringing it long distance. Marco Polo went through that part of the world. He probably picked some up, and there have been lots of explorers both from Asia and Europe that went through there. Probably everybody picked up some garlic when they came through. And then when they went home, when Marco Polo went home to Italy, started growing that garlic in Italy. And so the Italian growers said, hey, this is our garlic. And it turned out it was all Central Asian. We think that all the garlic that is in the world today came from the Central Asian area, probably was brought out of there by explorers and travelers coming through the region and dispersed to the rest of the world. When it got to the rest of the world, the focus on garlic was getting bulbs, not getting seed. It's not a crop that's known for its seed like soybeans or corn is. And so with the focus on seed, there's been a movement towards garlic that does not produce seed, like this garlic that is showing in here with Teresa Kotlinska, my collaborator from Poland. This is an Assyrian market. And so the production of garlic reproduction, the seed production of garlic goes along with flowering. Many of the garlics that are grown today in your farms, in your fields, do not produce seed stalks. This is a hardneck, what's known as a hardneck garlic. I don't have a picture of a softneck garlic, but on the left, it would look just like the hardneck garlic without the flower stalk going up above the plant. Those flower stalks often have that curl in them. So wild garlic always has a flower stalk, and in many cases can produce seed. And so it just turns out that because from a commercial or a consumer standpoint, you're not interested in the flowers, you're not interested in the seeds, you're interested in the bulb. And since you can take a garlic bulb and save some cloves for the next year and grow it again, that's what people have done. And so most of the garlic we have today is coming from those bulbs, the cloves in the bulb that's shown in the middle of this slide. There's also small cloves up in the flowers on the right of this slide. And this is an inflorescence or a set of flowers on the top of a garlic plant. And in that collection of flowers, there are flowers which are tinier things on the right of this picture. And there are also little bulbs in the left part of the picture. So bulbs don't occur just in the bottom part of the plant, in the cloves that we're familiar with. They also occur up in the flowers. And so it's possible to propagate garlic cloves from either end of it. It's just they're bigger in the bottom. But there just hasn't, going to your question, there just has not been much focus on growing bulbs, carrots, growing garlic for flowers. It's only been for growing it for bulbs. As a geneticist, I'm interested in growing it from flowers. And so what we did was we looked at a big collection of garlic from around the world, a couple hundred different garlics, and we looked for those, first of all, that flowered. And only about a third of the group that we looked at of a couple hundred flowered. Then the next thing we looked at is, of those that flowered, are there viable flowers that are producing pollen, and might there be some that are producing seed? And in fact, a small number do produce seed. And so, yes, those of you listening to this presentation, you can get garlic from the USDA collection that has the capacity to produce seed, but it takes a lot of work. If you're going to do it, you have to remove those tiny bulbs I show on the right side of this set of pictures, those tinier bulbs, because they compete with the flowers. If you don't pull those tiny bulbs out, the flowers usually don't produce much seed because they don't draw as much energy coming up from the stalk as those little bulbs do. So yes, you can produce garlic from seed, but it's only in a subset of hardneck garlic that has that capacity.
Thank you. So if you want to breed some garlic, would you just start off with that subset as a foundation stock and maybe just add in some wild garlic a little bit at a time to bulk up the genome?
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what's being done. One of the larger garlic dehydrating companies have generated a few acres of garlic from seed. Some collaborators with me have generated new garlic cultivars by doing just what you said. We've got, I've got a list of garlic I could send you if you're interested, of those garlics that can produce seed. And if you got listeners, or if you, Brandon, want to get going, you can develop your own new garlic, but be patient. It takes a while. And if you're in the wrong climate, it's tough to get the seed to mature properly. The better places are somewhat drier areas. I've got a collaborator in Wisconsin that's produced some seed. It's another one in Southern Oregon that's produced seed. So it is possible, but it's not as easy to produce seed as most seed crops.
Thank you.
Sure.
I guess this would conclude the presentation, the interview, I guess.
Yeah.
There's a little more. Never mind.
This just talks about some of the history where garlic has shown up at more of a historical record. And then I'll end it with this. These are all garlics that came from seed. So each of these is genetically different from the other. And so there's a lot of variation in garlic. But going back to your original question, we do not exactly know how we get these garlics that are soft necks. What's going on there? Because it came from seed, why can't it produce seed? But so there's still some questions to be answered for garlic, for sure.
Thank you. I usually end this interview by asking the interviewee, is there any messages you want to give to the audience before you go? And or to you.
Yeah, well, I guess in terms of messages, it's a lot of fun working with this diverse collection of plants. In my career, it's been primarily carrot and garlic. And we look to this diversity of the crop to help us make better crops in the future. In the same way we talked about diversity in the social sense, diversity is a great thing in the agricultural sense, because this diversity is what we tap into to make sure that we can sustain the production of garlic and carrot into the future. We're growing some of these crops in very stressful environments, because that's the way the climates of the world are going. And we're finding some carrots, for instance, that are very tolerant of some stressful environments. And this comes from evaluating that diversity that we see and we've been talking about in this interview.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure. Guess we'll end the recording.
Very good. Glad to do it. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's just